Thank you for joining us for part 2 of today's webinar. We are going to present the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, or ARPA, Stabilization Funding Webinar. This webinar is presented to you by the Early Learning and Care Division and our Fiscal and Administrative Services Division. This webinar is being held on September 17th from 10 a.m. until 11 a.m.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Andrea Johnson, and I am the manager overseeing the Child Development and Nutrition Fiscal Services Office. I'll be presenting this webinar today along with Virginia Early, who is the administrator of the ELCD Policy Office. And actually, I'm going to turn it over to Virginia now to get us started going over the agenda.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Andrea, and welcome back, everyone. So we've structured this presentation first to inform you all what ARPA or ARPA funds from the American Rescue Plan Act are being allocated for in the California State Preschool Program, or CSPP as we call it. And really that, both the overview of the funding and for the purpose. We'll also give you some background on the state and federal requirements that are driving this webinar and the conditions for receiving ARPA funds. And lastly, we'll go over the actual ARPA survey, both, the questions and more. So when we review the survey questions, we've incorporated some questions and answers into our slides in hopes that we are anticipating your frequently asked questions. If we do not address your question within the webinar, you may of course enter it into the Q&A feature of Zoom. We'll also be providing you with an email address that you can send questions on the ARPA survey to. So turning to the agenda, so diving right in, we'll then finish with some questions and answers. So diving into the next slide is where we are going to give you an ARPA funding overview. So the American Rescue Plan, or ARPA, funds are being provided by the federal government to states to address the financial burdens faced by childcare and preschool providers during COVID-19 and the instability of the market as a whole. Our state legislature and administration have agreed on how to allocate those funds, and that's outlined in Assembly Bill AB 131. Allocations provided for the California State Preschool Program include funding for stipends, rate increases, and support for family childcare home education network providers including an allowance for non-operational days, as well as reimbursing providers at the maximum authorized hours of care rather than based on actual attendance. So in the next few slides, I'll explain more about these ARPA allocations before I turn it over to Andrea. So our ARPA funds, first of all, in terms of our CFPP allocations, are being provided for 3 different stipend allocations. So first is the $525 per child stipend that CDE previously distributed in the spring or summer of 2021. So while these allocations have already been distributed using CRRSA funding, the Department of Finance is looking to maximize all available federal funds and therefore is associating the previously distributed CRRSA funds as ARPA funds. So as a reminder, the $525 per child stipends were based on November 2020 enrollments and included a 5% administration allocation and were administered by CDE. The second stipend allocation was approved in AB 131 and is a $600 per child stipend based on March 2021 enrollment. So an administrative allocation of 5% will only be provided to programs to administer a family child care home education network, or FECHN. These will also be administered by CDE. So the third stipend for the CFPP is what we're referring to as licensed capacity stipends or licensed provider stipends, as the amount of the allocation is based on the licensed capacity of the program. So per AB 131, all licensed centers will receive an allocation, including temporarily closed facilities named on the CDSS report called CCP COVID-19 facility closures. And they have to have a child daycare facility license on June 25th, 2021. A review of facilities with pending administrative action for license revocation, and that subsequently results in and where that subsequently results in the permanent closure of the facility will be performed by CDSS as part of this. So the amount, as I mentioned, varies based on the capacity. So $3,500 will be provided both to family daycare homes and centers with a minimum license capacity, or with a maximum license capacity of 14 children or fewer. $4,000 per center will go for those with a maximum license capacity of 15 to 24. $5,000 per center for those with a maximum license capacity of between 25 and 60 inclusive children. And then $6,500 per, and I guess that's supposed to be per center, with a license capacity of more than 60 children. And these are going to be administered by the Department of Social Services, or DSS. So if you have any questions, please email the email I'm about to put in the chat, everyone. And so this email is ccpb@dss.ca.gov, and that's the email address for stipend questions on this licensed provider stipend. So next, the next allocations, going to the next slide. I'm noticing in the chat that we have some issues with our closed captioning. So Mai, are you able to turn on the closed captioning? Okay, looks like that's been enabled. So for those of you that want to, thank you so much, Mai. Great job. So for those of you that want to access the closed captioning, at the bottom of your screen, there should be a button that says live transcript, and you can click that to get the transcription. So sorry for that delay, and thank you to my team for fixing that. Okay, so going to the state preschool allocations, there's also allocations for rate increases. So first are the rate increases that will increase the rate of CFPP contracts. So we've already talked about this a bit on our Friday webinars, but as a reminder, AB 131 specifies how funds are going to be distributed and states that beginning or commencing January 1, 2022, a contract rate will be established at the greater of the 75th percentile of the 2018 Regional Market Rate Survey, or the contract per child reimbursement amount as of December 31st, 2021. We understand that contractors are really eager to learn what their rates will be as of January 1st, and we're working very hard to have an update for you all on this in the next month or so. The second type of rate increases are one-time increases that the Child Care Providers United Union, California, has oversight of. Per Assembly Bill 131, CCPU will determine how the funding will be distributed, subject to review and approval by the state. The reimbursement rate supplements are supposed to be implemented January 1st through 2022 through December 31st, 2023, and are only for family child care home providers and family friend and neighbor providers. So moving on to the next one, the state preschool fetch-in provider support. So lastly, ARPA will support fetch-in providers. As was the case in fiscal year 21-22, reimbursement to fetch-in providers will be based on the maximum certified hours of care, regardless of a child's attendance. It is important to note here that school-age children will be reimbursed the maximum certified hours on the applicable schedule. So, for example, if the child is in school, the provider will be reimbursed the maximum hours for the school schedule. And while the child is on vacation from school and receiving services by the provider will be reimbursed the maximum hours allowed for the vacation schedule. Additionally, providers will be reimbursed for closure days if the closure is related to the COVID-19 pandemic. In fiscal year 2021, providers were allowed 30 closure days. In 21-22, providers are allowed 16 closure days. As with last year, allocations are only provided for closure days if the child attends state preschool with a secondary provider and the secondary provider payments are reported to CDE. So I'm now going to turn it over to Andrea for the next piece of this webinar.
Thanks, Virginia. Before I move on with the slide, I do want to clarify, because I'm reading the Q&A here, that the stipends that Virginia is speaking about that CDE is issuing, the $600 stipends, are in addition to the $525 stipends that we issued in the summer. So this is a stipend that is in addition to that. Additionally, we know that there was a survey that came out from DSS that was for the, actually, I don't know if it was specifically a survey, but it was something that programs needed to complete in order to receive the stipends that DSS is administering for those that are based off license capacity. So this survey that we're talking about today is separate from that. So I wanted to clarify that as well. So now moving on to this next slide. So about the ARPA survey requirements. So first, the Federal Office of Child Care, or OCC, at the U.S. Health and Human Services Agency requires that states administer an application or a survey to verify program eligibility. So eligibility for these ARPA funds. The OCC requires that specific data elements are collected by states, and that the states in turn report those data elements back to the federal government. AB or Assembly Bill 131 also specifies that contractors must provide information via a one-time application or survey in advance of receiving ARPA funds. So per OCC, eligibility must be determined at the site level. And therefore, CSPP contractors with multiple sites will submit multiple survey responses. So if a CSPP site or if CSPP contractor has 10 sites, for example, we will need 10 survey responses from that CSPP contractor to be submitted. Similarly, if for CSPP contractors operating family child care home education networks or fetch-ins, one survey must be submitted for each provider. So note that CSPP contractors may respond on behalf of sites or providers as long as they collect all the required information from the site and or providers in order to accurately respond. We're leaving this up to contractors how they want to collect the data. We understand that the preferences will be different across the state, but the requirement is that there is a submission for each site. That's the requirement. So second slide on ARPA fund eligibility. This slide outlines what makes a program eligible for ARPA funding. So there are two eligibility requirements. First, to qualify, a program must be either open or temporarily closed due to a public health order, financial hardship, or other reasons related to the COVID-19 pandemic. In addition to that, a program must be either licensed, regulated, or registered on or before March 11th, 2021, or meet all currently required Child Care and Development Fund, or CCDF, health and safety requirements, including the completion of comprehensive background checks. We're going to get into this in a bit more detail on the upcoming slides when we look at the survey questions themselves, which we're going to start getting into now. So the first portion of the survey, and also let me say before getting into this, we are going to be sending this survey out in a PDF format through the ELCD listserv. We started sending these out directly to program directors from an email address. It's arpasurvey@cde.ca.gov. We'll provide that email again later. But program directors may already be receiving the PDF version of the survey. So if you have received that in your email, feel free to pull that up and refer to that. If you have not received it yet, you will receive it today, and we will also be sending it out via the listserv. So this is what you're going to find in that survey. So the first portion is going to require the following information. You'll first select the CSPP contractor name that funds the site or the fetch-in, and that's going to be a drop-down selection. After making that selection, you'll type your site or fetch-in licensee name and the site location address. The last portion of this section will ask you for your name, contact information, race, ethnicity, and gender identity. For these questions, you should enter the name and information of the individual that represents the site. So meaning that if the contractor has decided to submit the survey on behalf of all sites, they would need to collect this information from the sites or the site supervisors in order to respond. If each site supervisor is responding to the survey, then the site supervisor themselves will just respond with their own information. For the items race, ethnicity, and gender identity, there's also an option for the respondent to select prefer not to answer. The second portion of the survey relates to your operational status. So there will be 3 options here, which are a direct service licensed program, a license exempt program, or a licensed family childcare home education network, or fetch-in. Continuing with the operational status portion of the survey, you'll find the first question that helps determine eligibility for ARPA funds. You'll be asked to select whether you are A, licensed, regulated, or registered on or before March 11th, 2021, or B, that you meet all currently required Child Care and Development Fund, or CCDF, health and safety requirements, including the completion of comprehensive background checks. Or option C is none of the above. If you choose none of the above, then your site is not eligible for ARPA funds, which leads us into some of the questions and answers that we have pre-prepared. So the first question is, how do I know if my program is licensed, regulated, or registered as of March 11th, 2021? The answer is that in California, no person may operate a child care facility without a current valid license issued by the Department of Social Services in accordance with the Child Daycare Facilities Act, unless such person is exempt from licensure pursuant to Health and Safety Code Section 1596.792. So CSPPs who were licensed by the DSS or who were approved as a license exempt program as of March 11th, 2021, do meet the criteria of being a licensed, regulated, or registered program as of March 11th, 2021. Here's a second question related to this eligibility determination. So if my CSPP began operating after March 11, 2021, do I still qualify for ARPA funding? The answer is that in this instance, the CSPP was clearly not licensed or regulated by that date, March 11, 2021. So the program will have to meet the second eligibility option, which is to meet all currently required CCDF health and safety requirements, including the completion of comprehensive background checks. If you're not certain if you meet these requirements, please do reach out to our general email box, and I'll give that here. We'll give it a couple more times throughout the presentation. It's ARPA survey, or ARPAsurvey@cde.ca.gov, and we'll help you to make that determination. So continuing with the survey questions, the next question will be the second question that is asked to determine eligibility for ARPA funds. You will be asked what the current status of the site is. So you will be asked to select if you are A, open, or B, temporarily closed due to a public health order, financial hardship, or other reasons related to the COVID-19 pandemic. If you select this second option because you're temporarily closed, you will also be prompted to enter the date that you intend to reopen. The last option is none of the above. And again, if you select none of the above, you are not eligible, your site is not eligible to receive ARPA funding. So again, we have a few Q&A to address this qualifying question as well. So the first question we have here is, would a CSPP that is temporarily closed due to a lack of qualified staff be considered qualified for ARPA funds? And the answer is yes. If a program is temporarily closed due to the lack of staffing or qualified staff as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic health emergency, the program is eligible to receive ARPA funds. In this instance, the program would choose the option temporarily closed due to a public health order, financial hardship, or other reasons related to the COVID-19 pandemic. The next question is a CSPP that permanently closed after March 11th, 2021 eligible for ARPA stabilization subgrants? And the answer is no. A program that permanently closes after March 11th, 2021 is not eligible. Again, in order to be eligible, a CSPP must be open to provide childcare or preschool services, or temporarily closed due to the public health, financial hardship, or other reasons related to the COVID-19 health emergency at the date of application. The next question on eligibility is related to a summer closure. So the question is, are programs that are not open during the summer due to scheduled closure and not because of COVID-19 eligible for ARPA funding? The answer is that they can be eligible as long as they are open at the time the survey is submitted. Again, in order to be qualified, the program must either be open, providing care, or temporarily closed due to the COVID-19 public health emergency at the time of application. So the key here is that the program is open at the time that the survey is submitted. We also want to address here closure due to wildfires, which we don't have on the slide, but want to address it because we know that this will be a circumstance for some programs. I've repeated a couple times that the program must either be open or closed due to the COVID-19 health emergency at the time of application in order to be eligible. There currently is not an exception to this, including for wildfire closures. So similar to the summer closure, we would recommend that the CSPP submit a survey when the site or the program reopens. If you anticipate that this will cause a delay in submitting your survey response, please do email us so we can try to help with this at our general email box at arpasurvey@cde.ca.gov. Yeah, so I think that's it on the slide. We want to help you as much as we can to make sure that you can receive those ARPA funds. So go ahead and email us if you have a question about that or you have that circumstance. Okay, so we're now going to move on to the next section of the survey, which will collect operational information. So the first question in this area will ask for the site's days of operation and the hours of operation for each day that the site is open. Next, you'll enter site licensing information or information related to a license exempt site or classroom. Some LEAs, we understand, have a combination of licensed and unlicensed classrooms, which can vary by site as well. So the survey allows you to enter enrollment data for various scenarios. So for example, an LEA may have a site with a license for toddlers, and at the same time, at that same site, they may have one classroom that is license exempt serving 4-year-olds. In this scenario, the LEA will indicate that they have one license and that they also have an unlicensed site and or classroom. So there will be 2 selections available to be able to select those 2 options for the LEA. For the unlicensed classroom, the LEA will enter for the licensed classroom, the LEA will enter the license number, the license capacity, and average enrollment. For the license exempt classroom that is serving the 4-year-olds in this example, the survey will prompt you to enter not a license number that will be excluded, but you will still enter the identified capacity and the average enrollment. CSPP community-based organizations or non-LEAs are all licensed, and so will therefore not have these various scenarios or combinations. Whether you're an LEA or non-LEA, if all classrooms are licensed, you will simply indicate the number of licenses that you hold. The survey then will prompt you to select the age groups of the children that are served under each license. So the options will be infant, toddler, preschool, and or school age, and you can select multiple there. Then you will enter the license capacity and the average enrollment. So we've added here some tips for reviewing the site data that you will be entering. So the sum of licensed capacity for each site and identified capacity for unlicensed site should represent the total capacity at that site. Meaning after you enter in all the capacity information for each site, the total should equal the capacity at that site. This check is important because you do not want to leave out non-subsidized enrollments or children that are enrolled in a program that is not a CSPP program. So for example, if you have a general childcare program, a CCTR program, all of those enrollments associated with that site should be entered into this section of the survey. So the total licensed or identified capacity should be for all children, not just those enrolled in the CSPP. So similarly, when you're reviewing your data, the sum of average enrollments associated with each of the licenses should represent the total average enrollment at the site. So if you're reviewing this, for example, the end of your survey, you determine that you have indicated an average enrollment of 100 across all licenses at the site, but you know that you have approximately 300 children enrolled, you'll want to go back, edit your responses before submitting your survey. Okay, we're going to now move on to the next section of the survey, which asks you for your intended use of ARPA funds. So ARPA funds may only be used for these categories and only used for these categories. So I'll read them here. So they are personnel costs, benefits, premium pay, and recruitment and retention, rent or mortgage payments, utilities, facility maintenance and improvements or insurance, personal protective equipment, cleaning and sanitation supplies and services, training and professional development related to health and safety practices, purchase of or updates to equipment and supplies to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic, goods and services necessary to maintain or resume childcare services, and lastly, mental health supports for children and employees. So know that you are responding to this question to the best of your ability at the time that you are submitting the survey. And if, for example, you do not initially intend to use ARPA funds for mental health supports, and you do not therefore select this option when you're submitting the survey, it's still okay to use ARPA funds for this purpose if you later find a need for additional mental health supports for children and or employees. You do not need to ask for CDE's approval to alter how you spend the funds. The key here is just to ensure that you are only spending ARPA funds on these categories as they are the only allowable uses for these funds. So the very last section of the survey is a certification section. This slide is just a summary of what you will see in that certification and agree to. So they are the use of ARPA funds only for those allowable categories that we just went over. Maintain supporting documentation of all the expenditures, and implement policies in line with guidance and orders from state and local authorities and any tribal authorities, if applicable, to the greatest extent possible. Additionally, the certification will ask you to continue to pay at least the same amount of total compensation as prior to application submission, and will not involuntarily furlough employees from the date of application submission. And lastly, to the extent possible, provide relief from co-payments and tuition payments for families enrolled, and then prioritize such relief for families struggling to make either type of payments. So note here that co-payments are synonymous with family fees. Federal guidance uses the term co-payments, while the state of California uses the term family fees. We understand that providing relief from family fees is not feasible for some programs. So we're going to address that in the next Q&A on the next slide here. So the question we have here is, are CSPPs required to provide relief from co-payments or family fees and tuition? The answer is that you are not required to provide relief from family fees if you are not in the financial position to do so. However, you must certify that to the extent possible, you will provide relief from co-payments and tuition payments for the families enrolled in the CSPP, and prioritize such relief for families struggling to make either type of payment. If you're not in the financial position to provide relief from co-payments and tuition for families, if you are in the financial position to do so, you should provide that relief and prioritize for families with incomes below 85% of the state median income. So the last slide we have here in the presentation are to discuss next steps. After you certify that what we just went over, you will be done with the survey. You also will be provided with a summary of your responses. That way you can print that and have that for your records. So let's look now at the next steps we have here. So first, we want you to ensure that your contact information is updated in CDMIS, particularly for the program directors, because that's where we will send the actual survey link to. And that's where we also sent this morning, or hopefully you've received it or will receive it shortly, the PDF of what we're going over here. So those PDF questions. So make sure that that is updated. If you have questions about how to update your information, or if you don't know if it's updated, please email cdmis@cde.ca.gov. We may get the survey link out as early as today. It might possibly be out early next week though, so watch out for that. Also, before getting started with the actual survey itself, we really urge you to review the survey questions. We are also going to post these survey questions on the ELCD COVID-19 website. So please gather the information you will need to respond to those questions before getting started. You should also determine who will complete the survey for each site. So have a game plan with your administrators and your site supervisors before getting started. If we receive multiple responses for one site, this will delay your allocations. Similarly, if there are missing survey responses for some sites, of course, this may also delay your allocations. If you're unclear on any of the questions or need help responding, please again email that email box, arpasurvey@cde.ca.gov. We will get you an answer as quickly as possible so that you can in turn submit your survey as quickly as possible. So before closing out here, I also wanted to address timeline for when you may expect to receive ARPA funds from the CDE. So for stipend distributions, this will largely depend on when you submit your survey responses. So we encourage you to submit your responses by September 30th, so the end of this month. That will give you a couple weeks to do so. At that time, we are going to gather the survey responses to determine which programs we can issue those $600 stipends to. We can definitely expedite this process for your program if all sites have responded and if we don't have duplicate submissions. We will issue subsequent payments. So if for some reason, you have an issue where you cannot submit by September 30th, that does not disqualify you. We are just asking if you can do so, please submit by September 30th. And then regarding the increases in contract rates that Virginia also discussed, we will need all sites to be responsive so that we can implement this portion of Assembly Bill 131 timely for your program. So we ask all contractors to track which sites have not submitted a survey response and follow up with the sites that do not respond. And again, we'd like all survey responses by September 30th if possible. We will definitely work with you all to help you through this process. So any questions, any support we can provide, please do email us at arpasurvey@cde.ca.gov. So that is the end of the presentation portion. I'm going to turn this back over to Alana to see if we can address any of the Q&A that we're getting in the
Thank you, Andrea. So yes, we definitely do have some Q&As. I think a lot of them were currently just answered. So the deadlines that you just spoke about, a lot of questions were asked about that. There were also questions regarding when will the link be sent out? if there can just be some clarity that we'll say out loud of when that, I think it's been established that the PDF that was sent out was just to send the questions out so folks would know ahead of time. But when will the actual survey link go out?
So it could be as early as today, but I will say on the safe side by mid next week. So certainly if you don't receive it by mid next week, you want to reach out. But I think to just, you know, in anticipation that it's coming, I would again ask that the program directors, those that are identified as program directors in CDMIS, that you make sure that your contact information is correct there. So like Alana just said, the PDF is being sent out today. And then we just need a little bit of extra time to make sure everything is tightened up for the actual survey link. So it will come shortly after. So you can start to review those questions, gather your data as soon as you get that PDF.
And I want to just add one thing onto what Andrea said. We've seen a lot of questions in the chat with people that are trying to click drop downs in the PDF and seeing if it will work. The PDF is not intended to have drop downs. It's intended to show folks what the questions are so that when you get the actual link, then you will know kind of what to expect. So the PDF is really kind of what you'll see once you get the survey so that you can start prepping for it, so you can think about the answers to the questions so that you're ready. And then you can bring all the information together so that you know what to expect when you actually click on the link.
Perfect. And Virginia, while I have you here, there's some folks asking questions regarding the stipends. Is it CSPP plus CCTR? And some clarity around that.
Sure. So AB 131 includes stipends for a broad array of programs, but we're only speaking to state preschool on this webinar because that's the only program that we are currently responsible for overseeing. As of July 1st, Department of Social Services is responsible for overseeing CCTR. So we want to be very focused on the specific program that we're been given authority to oversee and defer questions on CCTR to the Department of Social Services. I will say also that some folks were confused in the chat about why DSS was administering the state preschool license capacity stipends. And so just clarifying, that doesn't mean that CDE is still responsible for administering the California State Preschool Program. It's just that this is a stipend for licensees, and Department of Social Services is responsible for licensing. And so because of that, they're administering this one stipend that state preschool contractors will receive. And I had previously put in the chat the question, the email at DSS for questions about the license capacity stipend for CSPP. I'll put it in again if anyone missed it the first.
So Andrea, I see a question here about the ARPA funds, and it's reported, and on that ARPA survey, that is the reporting, correct? There's no secondary report that needs to be sent.
Correct.
Okay. Great. And so there's lots of questions here regarding enrollment and having to get average enrollment. I'd like to ask Jane to unmute if she's able to give a little bit of updates. Oh, I saw you for a moment. There you are.
Thank you, Alana. Thank you, everyone. There are a lot of questions regarding the average enrollment. This one, I need to ask Andrea. Will that be the current enrollment, or it would be the pre-pandemic enrollment? That's first question. And the second is, the enrollment is by average by the semester, or by weekly, by monthly, or by annually, or semester?
Yeah, thanks. This is a really good question. One thing we also, even though that DSS and CDE are both administering surveys for similar purposes. And in this case, when we're talking about the $600 stipends, it is for the same purpose. So we have been working very closely together on our surveys, and we want to make sure that we are aligning as much as we possibly can. So I want to take this one back to make sure that we don't give two different responses from our two departments. So thanks for the question, and we will answer this through our Q&A as soon as possible.
And then once we get the answers, and we also will send an email out.
Perfect. And I know that we're coming up close to 11 hours, and we certainly appreciate everyone who's been with us since 9 a.m. So I'm going to ask this to Andrea. So there's questions regarding the deadline for expending the ARPA funds.
That is another good question. Let us get back. There are actually, is more than one grant for ARPA funds. So I don't want to give the wrong answer here. So we will add that to the list. Thank you.
You as our contractors are giving us some great questions, and we super appreciate you being here. Let's see if there's anything else that we can clarify before we start closing up. So there is a question regarding, for the ARPA survey, is there reporting of non-certified children that are at the site?
Yes, when you're reporting enrollment, you want to report all enrollment at the site.
Great. I see we've done the average earn, we've done hours of operation. Let's see.
Alana, I see a couple of questions similar about having multiple sites. I do just want to reiterate that. If you have 2 sites or if you have 35 sites, you will submit a response for each of your sites. And so the survey link won't prohibit you from making, for example, 35 submissions.
Perfect. And Andrea, there's a question about, are we required to do the survey?
In order to receive the funds that Virginia just went over, yes, you are required to submit the survey. So the $600 stipend allocations, that's a $600 per subsidized child based on the 801A data as of March 2021. So that's what those stipends are based on. And then of course our big one this year as well is rate reform. So potential increased rates for your program. So in order for us to implement that, the survey is required.
And one question from Lisa is, if providers are participating in more than one fetching, do they have to complete multiple surveys for the same fetching? So this is a site-based. So I need to turn to Andrea for the answers. That's just
for the
one
fetching, it is, yeah, so it's 1 per fetching and then 1 per site if the CSPP program has multiple sites.
Perfect. I'm just scrolling through to see if there's any outliers. Let's see. We talked about survey families. There was some question we checked in about dues. We checked in about average enrollment. And we've gotten a lot of thank yous, so we do appreciate that. We know that this is probably, there's been a lot of questions that we've been unable to answer, and we like to give responses when we know the responses as 100% concrete. So we appreciate the patience with you there. Any other panelists see questions that they know the answer to they'd like to read out loud? I do see a lot are being currently answered, so I don't want to mess with someone's flow who's trying to actually type something. Perhaps I'll just make sure that you all have the email addresses while we're looking at these questions. Again, if there's any other questions once we've gone off this webinar and you still have more questions pending, please email arpasurvey@cde.ca.gov. You can also email our fantastic crew at CDMIS, cdmis@cde.ca.gov. And any questions that you have regarding the stipends with CCTR, which is now at the Department of Social Services. Virginia had put in here the email address for that, which is ccpd.pb. Oh, excuse me. See, I was trying to say it slowly because I thought I was going to mess up, and I did. At dss.ca.gov. Virginia, do you see any last minute questions that you'd like to reiterate?
Yeah, I'm just going through. So we recognize that there are a lot of questions here, and so we know that we haven't gotten to every single one that you've asked. So I think these are great standpoints for some frequently asked questions for us to develop. So just really wanting to reiterate that the PDF with the survey questions was sent out earlier today. The actual survey link will come shortly. I know some people are asking about, well, where's the survey for the 600 stipend, or where's the survey for rate reform, or where's the survey for the rate supplement? So it's really, there's one survey for CSPP, although it is unfortunately due to federal requirements at the site level. And so that's for all those different aspects of money, it's that one piece on the CSPP side. So if you didn't receive the PDF earlier today, you can reach out to the ARPA survey at cde.ca.gov to ask for it, but hopefully everyone got that. And then the actual link that will have the drop-down menus in it and will allow you to respond, that will be coming out in the next couple days, but definitely sometime next week at the latest.
So Virginia, I'm going to ask that move our slide ahead, and then we'll just start beginning our closeout. Virginia, would you like to close out our webinar?
Thank you so much, and I'm so sorry. I was a little distracted because we have some colleagues from DSS on the line, and they provided a link to a web page that includes more information about the licensed provider stipends. So thank you, Rachel. And so I put that in the chat for everyone. Really appreciate you bringing that forward, Rachel. So thank you to everyone who has stuck with us through this 2-hour webinar. With hundreds and hundreds of questions. We really appreciate your time. We appreciate everything you do for children and families. We hope we've provided you with the information you need to at least start thinking about completing the survey. Your strength and passion are so inspirational to us. They've helped get us to where we are today. Everything you do is so essential for children and families that have impacts both on their early years and for years to come. So thank you for your dedication, commitment, love, and joy for this beautiful work. Thank you for your day, everyone. Have a great day.